Okay, Kevin, keep it short. Go for it.
Okay, so just one thing, little where's this? I hear my notes. Okay, so we one thing when we go to shul, specifically or particularly shacharit, and we're late and we have to catch up or we miss, we let's say we way behind the Baltafila. It's always we don't always know what we can respond to, what we can't respond to. So let me just go through when you can answer Amen. So it says here, Amen can be answered in response to a blessing or prayer. And however, one must be careful not to interrupt their own prayer by answering Amen in the middle of a prayer that requires focus and continuity. And that would usually when it's a brocha, like a within that prayer. If you start saying Baruch, and at the end, or it's part of a bracha, you can't, that's basically the yardstick. So it says, when is it permissible to answer? If you're not in the middle of a prayer that you're reciting yourself, such as during the Amidah, where you can't interrupt, you can answer Amen if you hearing a blessing hearing someone else's blessing, like obviously the Baal Tefillah. And secondly, if you're in the midst of a prayer such as Shema Amidah, you can't answer Amen, even in regardless of which paragraphs, which of the three paragraphs of the Shema you've read. So yeah, that's it. Uh, in a nutshell, it's not the full comprehensive answer, but it's just a bit of a guideline.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Just in summary, last time we left, Lance had a bit of an issue with one or two aspects, including axes. No one likes axes. Nobody likes to be axed from the top, and nobody likes to be hit by an axe. But I can see Lance's waterfall there, but no Lance.
Sorry, I'm eating.
No, that's okay. You can munch. Arthur's eating, or that's
I'm,
fine. Let's
I'm
see.
muted.
Pardon?
I'm muted.
Oh,
Danny,
okay.
I'm half asleep, so it's fine.
Okay.
I'm fading out. I was sleeping earlier.
All right.
But
Manish
it's
and Halila is there. Anyway, okay. Let's get on with
uh,
it. Um. So, all right, guys. Let me just keep it rather simple. There was this discourse between Rav Yochanan and Rabbi Abahu. So Rabbi Abahu asked of Rav Yochanan, look, what happens if you have a person that was climbing a ladder and the rung broke from underfoot and it fell on somebody and killed? What's the law? So under such circumstances, do you consider the death resulted from an upward motion? Because how did it take place? The guy's climbing up a ladder. So therefore, you're seeing it from the perspective of the man climbing the ladder, and therefore it will exempt that person from exile. That's how we learnt it in the Mishnah. Or is the death seen from a downward motion because the pressure of the climber's foot on the rung was a downward motion in order to propel him up, and therefore he'd be sentenced to exile? So you've got to discern between two different cases. The case in the Mishnah always puts down the most obvious case first, and then the Gemara makes the cases a little bit more complicated. So in the Mishnah, the person himself fell down a ladder and killed the person underneath. So the instrument of death and the person himself are one and the same. Here, what we are saying is as a person climbs up a ladder, the rung breaks off and it cracks somebody on top of the head and they die. So therefore, the instrument of death is the rung of the ladder, but it's not identical to the person because what's that rung of the ladder doing? It's hurtling downward. What's the person doing? It is climbing upward. So, um, do we judge by the person or do we judge by the instrument of death? Okay, so that's your first question. And then you have this other question about how Rav Yochanan holds according to the Gemara compared to Rav Abayu. So, let me just test. Lance, how does Rav Yochanan hold compared to Rav Abayu? Were you munching? You can't answer. Okay, I'll take that as munch munch. All right,
Lunch.
Mr. Simpson.
I can't tell you. I just remember the arguments, not the people.
Okay, Aidan.
Okay, so I don't really remember who held which one, but I got a 50-50 chance. So,
I like that. Yeah. Okay.
but
That's high
wait,
enough.
can you just attribute each opinion to the person, if you don't mind? Sorry.
Okay. So, well, what are the two opinions?
So the one would obviously be that he's liable for exile, and then the other one would be that he's not.
Okay, you're going to have to do a bit better than that. So I'm going to give you 10 out of 10 for trying. So what we are actually saying here is the whole argument is if in preparatory to an upward motion, there's a downward motion, because whenever you're squatting with the bar on the back of your neck, okay, you're actually bending down in order to push that weight up. So there has to be a trajectory that goes at like a 30-degree angle upwards, okay? And therefore, in order to get that momentum, you have to squat down in order to push it up. You're not in a stationary position. So according to Rav Yochanan, we hold that if you're going to push an object up, but you're going down as a result, we can't look at it in terms of the ultimate goal of a compound motion. He said, what were you doing at the time? If you were going downward, it's seen as the actual action at the time. According to Rav Abahu, if you're squatting down in order to push up, then you have to see it as a compound motion with regards to the actual outcome of what you intended to do. And that's generally where they differentiate from each other. So it's not that Rav Abahu didn't know where Rav Yochanan was holding. He said, all right, you're going to have to kind of agree with me in a different case. What happens if the person's going up in a ladder, but the rung snaps from under him? In that case, even you, Rav Yochanan, would have to say that that person's not actually the person that's going down to cause the death, and then it for warrants exile. It's the rung that falls down, and even if the person's foot is sagging down in order to get up, it's groma, it's indirect. The instrument of death is the rung, not the person. So why would you hold then that it's the downward motion when in fact it's groma? So that's what he was asking of Rav Yochanan, if there's a difference between the person being the instrument of death or another object. Okay. So Rav Yochanan says, listen, you've just touched upon the previously established principle of a downward motion made to facilitate an upward motion. And the Brisa taught that he's exiled on that basis. In other words, Rav Yochanan says it doesn't matter according to evidence. Just hang on, Rav Yisra, I'm just giving a share. I'll close this now. Okay.
Don't want people to see
Oh, okay. Okay. So, guys, just give me one second. So he's saying, look, the law is based evidently on the compound motion. But at the end of the day, if you're going down in order to go up, you judged at that point. And it doesn't matter if there's a rung or an instrument that's separate from the person. So Rav Abaye says, listen, it can't be that way. This is why. If you read our Mishnah, it states the rule. Whoever killed inadvertently while engaged in a downward motion is exiled. But if he killed while he was engaged in a motion that was not downward, he's not exiled. So what's Rav Abaye saying to Rav Yochanan? Half the statement in the Mishnah is superfluous. Why? All you have to say is, listen, if a person kills downward, he's exiled. Why do you have to repeat the statement and say, in a motion that was not downward, he's not exiled? You're saying exactly the same thing. So you're saying the minute you're saying the same thing, the second part of the Mishnah is teaching you something different. And what is it teaching you? It's teaching you that even if you want to hold Rav Yochanan, that a downward motion to facilitate an upward motion is only seen as the action you caused and not your intent, then at the end of the day, even according to your view, you have to hold that if a person is propping themselves up and that rung snaps underneath, and it's not as if it's sagging where the person's going down, you have to admit in that case that if a rung goes down and it's an instrument that's separate from the person, um, there's no exile in that case. How can you say there's exile? Okay. So at this point, Rav Yochanan says, listen, I'm actually going to give you a counter argument because this rule adds another aspect. And what's that aspect? In other words, if it's saying so, if it wasn't a downward motion, he's not exiled. So he's saying, I've got a special rule to teach you. What happens if it's a motion of forwards, backwards? We've learned that if it's downward, you're exiled, which implies if it's upward, you're not exiled. But what about forward and backwards? And therefore, I want to teach you a case of how do you consider that in terms of liability for exile? Does that make sense? So according to Rav Yochanan, he's saying that forward and backward are considerations that have to be taken into account. And Rav Abahu, it's not a superfluous statement. You want to say it's coming to teach a case that a downward motion for intent of upward motion is in fact not subject to exile because of your intent and you seeing it as one compound motion. I'm saying whatever happened at the time, whatever your intent is, that's how it's judged. And you want to say, but then you try to checkmate me and say if there's an instrument that caused the death, but the person hasn't sagged, I've got to admit that the person's going upward, and therefore there's no exile. I can tell you that I don't have to hold by that because it's not trying to imply that. It's trying to imply the case of forward and backward. So he said, I want to give you a brisa. Now, I'm going to mention this brisa and I'm going to test you guys. There are four different brises, in fact. Okay. He's saying, look, you're dealing here with the case of a butcher. Now, you're not dealing with a case, and I saw an episode of The Sopranos where they shot somebody twice in the back of the head, and that were at Satrioli's butchery. I wouldn't eat from that butchery if you paid me. And they got rid of the dead bodies with the, what do you call it, those meat saws and whatever, and they were half hacking themselves to death in terms of the smell. And the next day's pork chops was was Tony in five pieces. So we're not talking about that case. We're talking about pre-technology that when you have to crush through bones, you're going to need a little bit of momentum. You can't just hit an axe down. You're going to have a butcher's meat cleaver going with the full momentum up and down. And therefore, you've got to, like, as I said, with nunchakus, develop a little bit of speed. So in this particular case, this is what we're talking about. You don't have to only go through meat. When I spoke to Rabbi Cohen about this, you have to go through bone. And that's why you need to develop the momentum. Because I said, listen, I've cut steak before. I can do it without any momentum with a tiny paring knife. He said, yeah, Day, it's all been prepared for you at Moishe's butchery. You haven't exactly had to hack through organs and bones. So as far as the meat cleaver thing is concerned, there's four brises. The first brisa states, okay, that if he was moving his arm forward while the mishap occurred, the butcher is liable to exile. But if he was moving his arm backwards, he's exempt from exile. Okay? Forward, liable for exile. Backwards, exempt from exile. That's the first brisa. The second brisa, when I say second, it's not successively or sequentially from each other. They're in different places. So there's another brisa that states, look, if you're moving backward, you're liable to exile, but if you're moving forward, you're exempt from exile. So now we've got two contradicting brisas. The first one said, forward, there's liability for exile, backwards, no liability for exile. Second brisa says, backward liability for exile, forward non-liability for exile. Then you've got a third brisa that turns around and says, listen, whether you're going forward or backwards, there's liability for exile. And there's a fourth brisa that ends up saying whether you go forward or backwards, you're exempt from exile. Okay, so I'm just going to test you guys. Arthur's in no state to be questioned, I can see. Gavin, Kevin, you want to give it a shot? Just nod if you don't want to be asked.
Yeah, I can answer, but I only heard two. Did you actually give four now? Because that's the
Yes.
problem.
Okay, no,
I
that's
can
why I
give you the
test
two.
everybody because
Sorry, no, I've got brain fog. I'll tell you what I heard.
no,
So
don't
the,
confuse it. Let me just quickly say it. Four brises. Okay,
give me the
Aidan,
last
you
two.
nice
I
and
know
young.
the first two.
Okay, Gavin, give the two you know.
I know the two that I heard. Sorry, I didn't hear the last two
No,
bits.
it's fine.
Sorry.
What are the two?
All
Let's
right.
just go through a
So
couple.
the two I heard very clearly. So if you're going in a forward motion, then then you're not liable. The first one, I think you're actually liable. And if you go, because it's kind of like going up or down, it's very similar. When you go down, you're going to be more culpable and you'll be exiled because you're more liable. Going up, you won't be exiled. So it's, to me, that's kind of similar. So you're going forward, you're more liable, so you will be exiled. Whereby if you're going backwards, you won't be exiled. And the
Okay.
other one is the other way around. So it's exactly contradictory opinion that if you go forward, you're not liable. If you go backwards, you are liable, and you can go to exile. So now it doesn't kind of make sense because that seems to contradict it contradicts the first one, but it also seems to contradict the up and down.
Very
I
good.
didn't hear
Very good.
3 and 4. Sorry, I didn't hear what
Very,
you said.
very good. So, Gavin, you've got it in a nutshell. Okay. First Brycer, you move your arm absolutely forward. You're liable for exile, which means if you moved it backwards, you're exempt from exile. First Brycer. Another Brycer, if you're moving backwards, you're liable for exile. If you're moving forward, you're exempt from exile. So you've got two contradicting Bryces there. Okay? Immediately. One is liability backwards but not forward. One is liability forward but not backwards. Two contradicting Bryces. Perfect. Your third Bryce says it doesn't matter whether you're moving forward or back, there's liability. The fourth Bryce says it doesn't matter whether you're moving forward or back, there's exemption. You're not liable for exile. Okay?
Sorry, Dan, this is the case of the butcher we're talking about, right? Where he's put the
Absolutely.
cleaver up and down. So in my mind, I'm hearing you saying forward and backwards, but I'm picturing down and up. That's how I picture it.
Correct. And the reason why you're picturing it is what happened is I was learning some of the Meforshim. I was learning with Rabbi Cohen, and Lance had certain issues. So what I did is I restructured this whole share and made it very simple. You got the end of the share last time when Lance had an objection, and what I'm saying is we only learn in a couple of lines time in the daf about how it's compounded with forward and upward and downward motion. At this point in the Gemara, all we are knowing is forward, backwards. We're not knowing up and down. So according to Rav Yochanan, the only thing is mentioned at the moment is liability forward, exemption backwards. Another Brycer, liability backwards, exemption forward. Third Brycer, liability forward or back, and fourth Brycer, exemption forward and back. So that's what Rav Yochanan so far has taught Rav Abahu. That's all we've learned so far. Next step is that it says, how the heck are we going to reconcile that? They seem like complete contradictions. And the Braisa are reconciled by Rav Yochanan because he said, look, at the end of the day, they're not independent exactly as Mr. Simpson said, and even Mr. Stoller, they're not exempt from upwards and downward motions. It's not like Aidan said in the beginning, when you're running with a knife and you accost somebody because your knife's straight forward. We're talking about a case where a guy gets momentum, okay, in order to chop through bone. So this is the case. I'm just going to go through it very, very quickly because I'm trying to get a good pace. Okay, so in other words, guys, to increase the velocity of his chop, the butcher first arches the cleaver back behind his head like this, okay? And then he brings it forward onto the chopping block. So that's what you call almost a golf. It's a preparatory swing. Now, he hasn't chopped through the bone yet because it's not big enough, but he's almost aiming and getting a little bit of a momentum going. So his swing has 5 parts to it. It begins with the cleaver in front of him, okay? So if it's in front of him, he first has to lower it forward because if it's a halfway motion before dragging it backwards, he's not going to get much momentum. So if it's in front of him like this, he has to first put it down before he gets the full momentum up. You get what I'm saying? Down before you get the full, because otherwise you've only got a 45-degree motion instead of a 90-degree motion. You get it? So in other words,
you also need that for aim. Sorry, you need to actually mark the spot so that your aim will be more accurate.
I agree with you. So it's an aiming issue and getting a little bit of momentum. It's both an aiming issue completely. But you know, Gavin, I'm so bad at aiming. I can sit there and go like this, and by the time I come back, I'll be completely skew. But let's just assume
skip that step.
Yeah, let's just assume that the guy's talented and it is a pre-aim. I think that's actually a bloody good point. You're not allowed to say bloody good point, but I can in terms of blood and meat, so I'm not technically swearing in this year because it's a butcher. All right. So,
Damon,
Jack, yeah, Kev?
just one point. What happens if the butcher has meat, has a carcass in front of him, and that's his intention? And if someone unfortunately happens to be behind him, he does a backward motion and he whacks him and and lethally injures him. That's his
Okay,
whole intention was to cut the meat.
doesn't matter.
I
So
wasn't just doing
I
it
tell you what,
like
there's
doing a
only one
haircut.
discerning.
Yeah.
There's two factors here, and we'll go through it, and then I'll just fly through this case. First factor, if it's an area where he's chopping meat where the public are allowed to stand, he is completely liable. If it's a private domain where, like, you're on a construction site and it says no unauthorized persons allowed, or is in the back of the butchery and no unauthorized persons are allowed, he's completely exempt from exile. The person has no right to be there. So, is it a public space? Uh, and is it a downward motion? If it's not a public space, he's exempt even if it's a downward motion. If it is a public space, if it's an upward motion, he's exempt. If it's a downward, he's liable. Great question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Damon,
Yeah,
quick thing. This sounds very similar to the one with the carpenter in Bava,
exactly.
where there was public or whatnot.
Exactly. So, Arth, you've given me new hope. I've got that little crusty coal in me that they call a heart. It's all warm now. Um, thank you, thank you. You actually did remember it. Actually was bought by one of the Meforshim. It's exactly the same case in Bava Kama with the blacksmith. Exactly. All right. So, guys, exactly. He starts with it in front of him. He has to lower to aim well, but also to get a full 90 degree or obviously velocity. So it starts off in front of him, he lowers it, and he raises it back towards his shoulder. And then he continues with it down all the way down his back, and he accelerates it forward, bringing the cleaver up to his shoulder, finally onto the chopping block. So there's 5 parts to it. Okay? Forward, up, down, swinging, back, and right through. So, bottom line, in the first bricer, if it's a downward forward motion and an upswing backward, we mustn't worry about forward and backward. The only thing that warrants us in the first price, it says if it's forward, he's liable for exile, which means when he was going forward, he was also going downward. Okay, when he was going backward, he was going upward. So that first bricer says forward, there's liability for exile. Backward was exemption from exile, which means when he was going backward, he was going in an upward motion. It was the first 2 steps. And when he was going forward, it was in a downward motion. That's why he's liable for exile when it was forward. But it has nothing to do with the fact that it was forward. It was, as Gavin Stoller said, forward combined with a downward. An exemption backward going with an upward. So that was the key. In the next bricer, when it says you're liable for it going backward, it's because the backward wasn't in backwards like this. It was back that way. So in other words, it was the third and fourth step. So when you tonk somebody going back, it's the backward downward that makes you liable to exile, and forward upward makes you exempt from exile. Okay? So that's the extra component. Now, the other one, which says you're liable for exile forward and backwards, it wasn't because it was just forward and backwards. It's forward and backwards. You tonk the guy going back but down. You tonk the guy going forward and down. And therefore, there is liability for both for exile. In the case where you exempt from exile for forward and backward motion, it's because you were going forward up and then you were going forward back. You were going forward back, but upwards. So therefore, the bottom line of all of this is it's reconcilable, and it has nothing to do with forward and backwards. It's just whether it was had the component of downward with that motion or upward. Downward motion, liability; upward motion, exemption from exile. Is that clear? It's very straightforward.
Yeah, I can't. I want to see if I can. It's basically it's like gravity. Okay, if you're going towards gravity, which is down, you've got more power. But when you're going away from gravity, you got less power. That's what it seems to be focusing on. That's what I'm
Also,
seeing in my
somebody's
head.
not going to be flapping their wings on top of you. Somebody's going to be
Yeah.
underneath you or in front of you or behind you, but they're not going to be hovering on a drone on top of your head. So it's very difficult to have injured them to that level upwards.
Yeah.
It's very easy
Plus,
down,
plus
no
upwards
matter
is a
what.
lot slower.
It's true.
And
It
not as
goes
nice.
against gravity and
Yeah.
it doesn't have the same
Yeah.
level of force. But you're
Yeah.
not expecting somebody to be on top of your head. You can expect
Mm.
somebody to surround you, and therefore
Yeah.
anybody surrounding you is a problem. So that's fine. Um, Now, before we go on, so the rule of it is the sentence of exile depends on the actual direction of the motion going downward. Whether it's compounded with the forward or backward is irrelevant. Lance, does that make sense to you before we move on? Because that was the issue that you had.
Look, I can sort of understand the things the butcher with a knife up and down, liable, not liable, and that it's not taken being an accident, it can be liable. But when you go back to the beginning about climbing up a ladder and a rung breaks and you fall and you kill somebody. So the reason I've got a question about it is because it happened to me. I didn't kill somebody, but I was climbing down a manhole and a rung broke and I fell. It was a 3 meter deep manhole, and if there was someone under there, I could have killed him. So I can promise you that's an accident. And when you're down, you're definitely more cautious than when you're going up. Because when you're going up, you've got your hands to feel with and you can check that it's right. When you're going down, you don't know that it's going to break. It's an accident, but this is saying you're liable.
So, firstly,
It
what
happened to
you're
me.
saying to me, let me just see if I understand what you're saying to me. You're saying naturally when you go up, you should actually be more liable then because you're less cautious. Because when you're going down, you don't want to actually damage yourself, and therefore you're more cautious. So, since you're more cautious, why should you be liable going down? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
because when you're going down, you can't see exactly where your feet are, you can't feel exactly. But when you're going up, you get your hands. It's much more sensitive. It's easier.
Okay, so exactly on what you're saying, that's why the Mishnah brings three particular cases. The first case, if you remember from the Mishnah that it brought, was a case of basically stating, look, if you putting the plaster on your roof and you're getting it in an upward motion so the rain can run off, if you're going upwards, you're not liable. If you're pushing it downwards, you're liable. The reason why it's obviously you're liable there because it costs nothing to lose a rolling pin. And the second case is when you're lowering an object of high value, where you're much more cautious because if it's a Steinway and Son piano, you could lose 200 grand, or you could have all your valuables crash, and therefore we say you're still liable even if you've got a lot to lose. And the case that's mentioned in the Mishnah, in the last one, is even if you have pots of money or the item you're lowering down is not expensive, so you don't care if that's broken, you certainly don't want your bones broken. And therefore, in a case where you could have your bones broken, surely there you're much more cautious. And why should you be liable? Because the last thing you want to do is injure yourself. I mean, a lot of people want to call it a day and off
That's
themselves, but they
exactly the case. When you're going down, your life's in danger and you're more cautious.
correct. And what the Mishnah is coming to teach you is that even in the case where you stand to lose the most, there's still liability for an inadvertent killing for two reasons. And it uses that case because it's the least obvious, Lance. And you are completely correct, and the Mishnah agrees with you. It says, surely in a case where you've got to stand to get injured to the point of where you could even almost kill yourself, you would never do anything to damage yourself, even if you didn't give a hoot about your other people, or you didn't really care about your belongings because you were either rich or the item you were moving up and down the third floor to the first floor wasn't a lot of value. You would think that this person has so much to lose, it's almost proof that it was accidental because they wouldn't want to insure itself. And the Gemara says, even in that case, you should have made sure to double and triple check the equipment and to make sure you had safety gear, that if you're going down a ladder, there was a harness to stop you in case a rung broke. That's what the Gemara is trying to say, is that there should have been either safety equipment or a double check. And you are liable for an inadvertent killing, but what we're going to learn in the next Mishnah is under what circumstances. If there was a bad manufacturing, but it looked solid, and the rung snapped off. This is what Rav Abahu is saying, and the argument with Rav Yochanan, that's not your fault. It's different to a rotten rung, and that's what the Gemara is going to go through next time. Where there's a rotten rung, that's definitely liable because you know it's rotten. If it looks good, but there's a manufacturing default breakage, surely there's no liability in that case, even though it's downward. So this is what we're going to be tackling. So Lance, it is a good point. So what? But all I'm saying is that last case of the Mishnah is saying even if you stand to lose, there is culpability there, and that's why you have to be taught the three cases, and that's why Simpson said, well, why do we need these three cases? So, so I think
Yeah.
at this, yeah, guys.
Yeah, Dan. I mean, the way I see it here, I mean, I agree with Lance, is that it is an accident. I mean, obviously not your intention, but I think the bottom line is over here that someone got killed. You know, whether or not it's your intention or not, someone died. And I think that what the Torah is actually doing here is offering an opportunity to actually get kapara for it, to do the tshuva. So I think, you know, as opposed to living with guilt, you know, for the rest of your life that you fell off a ladder, whatever it may be, whatever the situation is, and you live with that for the rest of your life, you can't just have a tuna sandwich the next day. Is that you actually go into exile, you know, you actually go through the process, like regardless if it was your intention or not, but you were the vehicle for someone else dying. It's not a great feeling. I can't imagine that being a great feeling at all. And maybe exile actually offers you the opportunity to actually, okay, that's what God wants. And I can actually, you know, get, you know, some tshuva as a result of this.
Correct. And Rabba is in a complete agreement with you, or should I say you with Rabba? Because Rabbi Cohen said to me, never mind mens rea, actus rea. He said, a Jew died on your watch. And he said, Rav Schottenstein said to me, there was once in Durham Road, this woman that got smacked by her husband, and the wife ran across the road by George Avenue, like where it was Durham going to become George. And this Jewish guy, he turned the car and killed her. Guy was finished and knocked him for years, and he did nothing wrong. So what the Era Miklat does is two things. It provides somebody with a basis to have almost a cathartic atonement because it's the fact that it happened to you on a spiritual level, the fact that it happened to you, there was something deficient in your soul, whether it was negligence, or let's just say it wasn't negligence, it could have happened to you, it could have happened to anybody that climbed the ladder. Why did it happen to you? There's something wrong that you're not holding on a level where something like that doesn't happen to you, and it should shake you spiritually to the core, as Rabbi said. A person died, and therefore there has to be a debriefing and a trauma place where you can actually feel you've got skin in the game, and you also stood to lose. And also, if the family feels that they lost a relative, even if it was a default by the factory or whatever the case may be, but they feel that there was some remorse that you have on a deep level, it would go towards healing the family, making them not want to have vengeance against you, and you realizing that you can't just have a chicken salad the next day. You're in a good company with Rabba. And in the beginning, we all saw it only according to Rav Abahu, according to Abaya, not Abayu, this is Abaya and Rav Yochanan, but Abaya and Rabbah. But now we can see it from Rabbah's point of view, exactly as Gavin Simpson said. So the whole point of the Gemara, Aidan, is that we go backwards and forwards to see it from a different point of view, because in the beginning you see it from one point of view. And now Lance has said, but you know what? It could have happened to him and of no fault of his own. Lance is the least negligent person I know. He's cautious. He's like, he believes in Sheikh's safety standards, and he's very conscientious. And I would be very hard pressed to see that Lance was negligent. So I think, according to Rubber's point, is for sure in a public area you're entitled to chop wood, and there might have been nothing wrong with your axe, and somebody died. But the fact that you were involved in the process is traumatizing. You're completely right. Guys, this has been a good share. I hope this has cleared up the matter. I wanted to make it as simple as possible, and we fly through two little pages here. I went at a good.
Sure.
God, thank
All
you.
right, I know we've got 3 minutes left. Where I don't have anything further to say. Does anybody have anything further to say? Guys?
Well, listen, I would repeat the whole thing over again, but there's not enough time. All right, see you tomorrow.
All right, guys, have a good evening. Thank you for joining. Be well.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Catch ya.
Thank you.